Let's talk now about, well, the promise that just keeps on giving. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, but somehow expect a different result. I'll show you who is leading Labor yet again up a garden path that Australia will reject and why Australia will reject it. And it's based on evidence, not Twitter. But first, when H.W. Albo was out there selling, he was trying to talk to anyone that he could in vaguest terms as possible to try to undo the damage that he did yesterday with our old mate David Spears over there at Channel 2. Well, of course, as he wants to talk about net zero or 100% by 2050, there is not just transitional costs, but part of the justification from Albo and the other members of Extinction Rebellion is that the cost of not doing anything is apparently more expensive. So today he tried to give an example of what the cost would be, creating a further problem for himself, not just at this election, but for the next 10 to come.
We saw a bit of the costs of inaction over the bushfire season, when we lost 33 lives, when we lost over 3,000 homes, when we lost 12 million hectares of land, when we have, who knows what the cost is. What we know is that the cost of that season certainly won't be $2 billion that the government talks about.
So, logically, if the government's current attitudes has produced the fires of the past summer, Albo is now inferring that there will be no more bushfires, that somehow no one will ever die again in a bushfire if his plan kicks in. In 2050, there will not be 1 hectare of land that will be lost to bushfires. This is rubbish. As I said to you last night, it's a Jedi mind trick. Move along, but it's not working, and it won't work. Because there is one very fundamental thing that came out today on the front page of the Australian newspaper and News Poll, which shows that the majority of Australians understand why this bushfire season was as bad as it was. About 35% of people said it was climate change that made this the bad season that it was. 56% of people know the reality that when you decide to draw a circle on a map, make it a national park, lock it up so no one can access it, nobody can remove any of the foliage, any of the dead wood, that eventually it becomes a tinderbox. And for whatever reason, when it lights, remember, according to the Australian Institute of Criminology, 85% of fires for the past decade have been caused by human beings. Those things take off like a rocket. But when I said about how the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing but expect a different result, the fundamental Rubicon that no one in Australian politics has been able to cross, not Julia Gillard with her carbon tax, not Bill Shorten with his ETS, not Bill Shorten and the Labor Party with their 45% emissions target and 50-50 renewable energy targets, is are you willing to pay for it? Because have a look at this. Of those polled, 41% say that they would be prepared to pay more for their electricity bills compared with 30% who said that 3 years ago. Yet 50% of voters maintained they were not prepared to pay anything extra. That's the political problem. Now, that's nothing to do with climate change denial. That's about our ability to pay our bills. Because as I told you last night, the CSIRO produced this report in 2017. This report makes claims that to replace the electricity system that we currently have, so the wires can put up with people who are able to store and create energy on their houses through things like solar panels and batteries, to have more renewable energy in the system, the grand total of replacing that system that currently exists is, are you sitting down? $1 trillion. The BCA, who again were invoked by Albo and his mates today, they say that it'll cost the Australian economy $22 billion every single year between now and 2050. That is $660 billion. If we move to, at some point, a fully electric car fleet, that would be $20 billion that would be robbed when it comes to revenue in Australia that come out of fuel taxes and car registrations. This is the problem for the Labor Party. You can say that the cost of inaction will cost us more over the next 50 years, but when there's $1.6 trillion worth of changes to come, transitions, between now and 2050, you're going to pay. You're going to pay over and over and over again. And instead of the Labor Party focusing on numbers that have way higher approval than making pay people for drastic climate extinction style solutions to climate change, the vast majority of Australians haven't had a pay rise since 2008. Underemployment, the number of people who are working yet want to work more, is many times higher than the overall number when it comes to unemployment. You know in your house that everything goes up every year. And that's supposedly the cost of doing nothing. Albo said in his now fateful interview that I'm sure he regrets with David Spears, expecting that it was the insiders of old, where Barry Cassidy would do the press secretary job of Bob Hawke for any potential Labor interviewee. Well, he came up against a bloke who was armed with numbers. The two numbers that I have just quoted here of $1.6 trillion are the numbers that Spearsy had at some far right-wing think tank. So enter the real architect, the very definition of insanity inside the Labor Party, Mark Butler. Mark Butler from South Australia is the bloke who at one point was the party president of the Labor Party. He has been the shadow climate change minister since 2013. He put together the policies that were rejected in the 2016 election. He put together the policies that were rejected in the 2019 election. And he's put together this policy that I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go in 2022, let alone the 10 elections after that. I know this annoys some of you. I know it really pisses off even more of you. Climate change is real. And of course we have to do something. But when you produce 1.3% of the problem, coming up with even a 1.6% solution to the problem still leaves a fairly large number with a 9 in front of it that we have no control over, all of which will ultimately still affect how severe the bushfires are, how little rain there is that falls, how long the droughts go for. Now, at the very heart of the conceit, where Albo thinks that somehow it is not insane to do exactly the same thing as they have done for the past 2 elections, is that somehow there has been a revolution that has happened over summer. Well, even when the Sydney Morning Herald found a grand total of 17 people to put in a room in both Sydney and Melbourne to come up with the nastiest possible ways to describe Scott Morrison's leadership, and they were harsh, the majority of people in that room said they weren't willing to pay more when it came to climate change. That's the political problem, not the far right wing, not the regressive voices on Sky News, not the blue rinse set in the Liberal Party, but the Australian people. The Australian people who know that there's only so many times you can screw us over before eventually we wake up to the idea that you don't have to screw us this hard, all day, every day. And remember, unlike Bill Shorten, this isn't just about power. It's about agriculture. It's about transport. It's about what you eat, and it's about how we move things around this country. So good luck, Albo, because if the voice that you are trusting is the one that got it wrong twice before, and you're going to let him go even further for a third time, seems kind of insane, right?